The next property of soil is soil water. Soil water is important, more important than any other ecological factor, because number of things related to the plant community, related to the soil environment, mineral solubility, etc., they are dependent upon water only. So that's why it's a very important factor. Now, it is not only required for the general metabolic needs and the transpirational needs of the plant, but this is a medium in which soil salts, they will be dissolved, and only then they will be available to the plants for absorption. Then the activity of soil flora and fauna, right? The animals and the plants which are present in that soil, their activities, they are also dependent upon water, as well as the humification, means the formation of humus. That is also where water is required. Now, from where the water is obtained, the ultimate source is rain. But whatever water is falling on the soil surface, whole of that is not to be retained by soil. Most of it is lost in the form of runway or gravitational water. And other forms which are retained by the soil, they have been further categorized into different types. So the first one we have is a runaway water. This is the one which doesn't enter the soil at all, and it is drained from the surface along the slope and called runoff. Okay, so this is not going to enter the soil. Second is gravitational water. It is again not retained by the soil, but it enters the soil and then it drains downwards under the influence of gravity, so that ultimately it meets the groundwater. This phenomena in which the water is drained downward under the influence of gravity through soil is called percolation. Now, from where this takes place? This is from macropores, and those pores which are large in size, means 0.05 mm. From there the water is directly entering the soil and just leaving it to enter into the groundwater. Then it will finally reach to the groundwater, and you all know the upper layer of the groundwater is called water table. This is a general phenomenon that it is going to add to the water table. But at few places we have observed that there are certain impermeable strata present in between the soil horizons. So in between we have certain layers, like clay material is deposited which is impermeable, and that results in the formation of false water tables, which are called perched or hanging water tables. So you can observe, in addition to the true water table, there may be present few to many perched water tables in a soil. So we'll have a look at it. This is a general water table, the true water table. So you can see here there is a parent rock, bedrock. Over that the water is flowing, which is the groundwater. And the topmost layer of this groundwater is called water table. Now this is a true water table. Okay. And these arrows, they are representing that whatever water is falling on it, the one which will just run from the surface, that is called runoff. It is not going to enter the soil. The other one which is going to enter, and then it will be added to this groundwater through the phenomena which is called percolation. So this is the normal phenomena. Okay, but we have another case in which perched water tables are observed. So how this happens? You can see here we have an impermeable layer in the soil horizon before reaching the water table. So what will happen? The water is going to percolate, but it will be collected in this area. So when it is collected in this area, the topmost layer, now this is not a real water table, but it will serve as the perched water table. Okay, and then here you can see this is a groundwater. So this one is the real water table. Now, what are these things? Epiaquic and endoaquic. These are the terms where the groundwater that reaches close to the soil surface. So you can see here the depth or the soil horizons, they are very sparse, they are very thin, because of which the groundwater is reaching to the surface of the soil. Then we use the term endoaquic when it is the true water table that is reaching to the surface. But epiaquic is a term when the water from a perched water table is reaching to the soil surface, because it is close to the surface here. So endoaquic is for the groundwater reaching to the soil surface. Epiequic, this is when you have perched water table in between, and from there the water is charging the soil and it is close to the soil surface. You call it epiequic. Okay, so this is a concept of perched water tables. Now the third category is hygroscopic water. Hygroscopic means now phenomena of adsorption is involved. So the water that is adsorbed, it should be AD, adsorbed or imbibed on the surface and interstices of soil colloids, that is called hygroscopic or imbibitional water. So you can see here, we have this last form is a hygroscopic. On the surface of soil colloids, this water has imbibed. Okay. Now this is not available to plants. Why? Because with the very strong forces, with the imbibitional forces, this water is attached to the soil particles, so it cannot be withdrawn from there. However, this water can evaporate. Okay, this can show the phenomena because evaporation is a physical force that may occur, but for plants it is unavailable. Now on this basis, we define a term hygroscopic coefficient. What is hygroscopic coefficient? This is a maximum amount of hygroscopic water that can be held by 1 mm thick layer of soil placed in saturated atmosphere at constant temperature. Means I have this layer, 1 mm thick layer of soil. I am keeping it in a saturated environment of water at a particular temperature, and temperature should not vary, it should remain constant. Then the maximum amount that can be adsorbed on the surface of its particles, that is called its hygroscopic coefficient. Okay, clear? Now you can see other pictures also. We have gravitational water, means the water that is entering and through the micropores it is going to finally add to the water table. Then capillary water, we are going to study next. Capillary water means the one which is present in micropores. This was in macropores, and this will be in micropores. So where the size is very small and these pores, they behave as small capillaries in the soil so that they can hold water in them. Okay, so here the water is held in the micropores, and this is available water which the plant roots can absorb. So what is capillary water? It is a water present inside the micropores of the size 20 microns or below at an angle of micropores and as thin films around the soil particles. So if you have small micropores, let's suppose these are the soil particles, and in between these are the areas which are making cavities, pores. Okay, I can draw a bit larger also. These are soil particles. So in between these are the pores which are having the size 20 microns or lesser. So they will be the water that will be filled in these capillaries. Along with that, the area, this area, okay, it will line this area as well. So here there is one colloidal particle, here there is another soil particle, another soil particle. So these surfaces of these particles, they will also be having water retained on their surface. Now it is the only available form for plants. The fine textured soils which are having lot of micropores, they can hold large quantity of capillary water as compared to the coarse textured soils which have large particles like sandy soils, because they don't have micropores. Then the coarse textured soils, it means they are physiologically dry. Why? Because they don't have micropores. If micropores are not there, then the water is not going to be held in the form of capillary water. So that's why they are physiologically dry. There may be water present, they have macropores, there may be water present in the soil, but immediately the rainwater, when you are going to pour over the surface, whenever there is a natural rainfall or by chance you are irrigating that land, and if it is a sandy soil, then the water will percolate immediately. The soil is going to absorb water, but that water will not be available to plants. Why? Because they can only absorb the capillary water, and these sandy soils, they have no micropores, so no capillary water. They only have macropores. So they have good drainage, but they are not good for the plant absorption. Then the zone of capillary water maintained by the rise of water table is called capillary fringe, and the area which is above capillary fringe is called aeration zone. From soil to soil, depending upon texture, the capillary fringe varies. It may be of the area 0.5 to 2 meters of the area from the water table. Okay, and whenever we talk about the gravelly soils, there you observe that fringe area is totally absent. Whereas if we talk about the clayey soils, then up to 2 meters you can observe this area. It's a very simple concept. You can see here. See, this is a groundwater. Okay, this is a totally saturated zone, and you know just below it there is a parent rock, right? So the top layer of the groundwater, this is called water table. Now from water table, some of the water through capillary action that rises into the soil layers which are present just above it. So they result in development of this area which is fully charged with the groundwater, and this is called capillary fringe. Its size may vary from 0.5 to 2 meters. It's totally absent in gravelly soil. If it is gravelly soil, it is not there. But if it is a clayey soil, then it has lot of micropores and they serve as capillaries, so the water will rise and you can observe it up to the level of 2 meters from water table. Okay, so this is a concept of capillary fringe. The area which is present just above this, that area, that zone, that is called the aeration zone. This area, the capillary fringe, this is a non-aerated area. Why? Because here whatever pores were there, they are all occupied with water. They don't have any space for air. So that's why this is a poor aeration zone, whereas just above it we have the aeration zone. So this complete, that will be the aeration zone. Okay, now the fifth form is water vapors. What are water vapors? Just as we talk about the air present around us and it has moisture, it has water vapors, 1% water vapors in it. Similarly, the soil environment, soil atmosphere, that also has water vapors. Though these are unimportant for plants because they are not absorbable by plants, but they are otherwise important for the movement of water in the soil. How? At night, these water vapors, they rise to the upper surfaces, and under the phenomena of condensation they will be converted into liquid. So somehow they are helping in surcharging soil with water. So that is an important phenomena which is called night recovery. Means whatever water is present in the form of vapors in the soil, at night it will be condensed back to the liquid so that the soil become recharged again. The phenomena is called night recovery. Okay, last form is combined water. Combined means which is not available in the free form. You cannot have the simple water molecules in the free form, rather it is combined to some mineral element. So it is present in the form of hydrated mineral element. For example, you have red copper sulfate. In copper sulfate with the lattice structure we have 5 water molecules. So this is a hydrated form and it cannot be removed from here. So this is an unavailable form of water for plants. So we have all these types again here. Chemically combined water. These are the molecules and it is within their structure. So it is not available. Hygroscopic water, it is on the surface held by the imbibitional forces. So this is also not available because force is very strong. Capillary water is the one which is present in the micropores and this is available for plants. And gravitational water is the one which is going to percolate down and add to the groundwater, and this is also not available form. Okay, so these are how they are differentiated. So only available form is the one which is present in the micropores, that is called the capillary water. Okay, this is a diagram that you will draw in your examination. It is a club diagram of all forms, so need not draw separately each type. So you can have this one diagram only. We have gravitational water. It is not referring to the soil horizons. Okay, we have just drawn different forms of water. This is not in relation to the soil surface, horizon A, B, parent rock, no, nothing. It's a simple representation. So you have one type gravitational water which is not available form. Then there is a combined water which is present along with the inorganic salts, and this is also not available form. We have water vapors which are present in soil atmosphere, that is also not available for plant absorption. Hygroscopic form which is present on the surface of the colloidal soil particles, and again this is not available. Then you have capillary water. Capillary is the one which is present in the micropores and this is a available form for water. So see, it has been mentioned here. This is a wilting coefficient. We will study this in the permanent wilting percentage. Okay, so you can see here we have all these types. They are the unavailable forms of water, and we have this, the capillary water, that is the available form of the water. And we will study this term field capacity. Means whatever water is present in the soil, that constitutes its field capacity. That we will study later on. Okay, this is another diagram to show the different types of soil water. Like there is rain and precipitation, which is an ultimate source to surcharge soil. So that water, some of the water will not enter the soil and it will be removed as runaway water. Then other that will enter the soil, it may assume different forms. For example, it may remain on the surface of soil particles called hygroscopic form. It may remain in the air cavities in the form of vapors form. It may present in the micropores in the form of capillary water, or it may directly get percolated and add to the water table to form the gravitational water. So these are the various forms of soil water. So this diagram you have to draw in your paper. This is an optional one. You can draw or skip it. Okay. Now we have few terms associated with water. First is field capacity. It is a maximum amount of water retained by soil per unit of its dry weight after the gravitational percolation has stopped. Okay, so how we do it? Then we'll repeat the definition again. So we have soil sample with us, and we let's suppose there was proper rain for 1 to 2 days, or you irrigated the land for all 24 hours to 48 hours period. So now enough water is present in the soil. Okay, then you leave the land and you will observe that the water enters the soil, and whatever water it wants to retain it will, and rest will be added to the water table, right? So whatever water has been retained by the field, that is called its capacity. So that is the field capacity. If you try adding more water to that, extra water to that, then what will happen? It is not going to enter soil. It will not increase the moisture content of the soil, but it will directly percolate down. It is not going to be retained in any of the form like the hygroscopic water, the water vapors, capillary water. No, it will not take shape of any of these water forms. Directly it will go and enter to the water table. So that is called field capacity. Again, read the definition. Maximum amount of water retained by soil per unit of its dry weight after gravitational percolation has stopped. So this is a water sample, soil sample. Let's suppose I am pouring water over it. There was a sufficient rainfall for 2 days, or I irrigated the land continuously for 24 to 48 hours, so that now the water is entering the soil. Okay, so you know when water enters the soil, it will percolate to the groundwater, and other will be retained in different forms. We have studied 5 different forms. So amongst these, the 4, they are at the soil level. That is it may be the hygroscopic water, it may be water vapors, it may be chemically combined water, it may be the capillary water, right? All these, they are at the level of soil. Or last is, it may be gravitational water if it is percolating down. So you will sufficiently saturate the soil for 24 to 48 hours, then the maximum amount which will be retained in these forms when the percolation has stopped, means now no more water is being added to the gravitational water, then this is called the field capacity of the soil. If you are going to add more water, then what will happen? This water is not going to take any of these shape, rather it will be directly percolated to the groundwater. Okay, so it is not going to increase the hydration. Now, field capacity, it is dependent upon texture of the soil and the organic material present in that. It has been seen that the field capacity of sandy soils is least, which is 5% of the dry weight. Then for sandy loam, it's 15 to 25%. For typical loam soils, it is 25 to 35%, and maximum for clay soils, which is 45% of their dry weight. Now another term is water holding capacity, which is abbreviated as WHC. We have studied this in practical also. What is water holding capacity? The percentage of water retained by the soil after it has been immersed in water for 24 to 48 hours. Means a fully saturated soil with water which is not containing any air. Even the macropores, they are filled with water. See, there is a difference between field capacity and water holding capacity. I told you in field capacity, whatever water is entering into the soil, that is assuming all these four forms, and whatever is left will be added to groundwater, right? But here in water holding capacity, we are saying that whatever water you are fully saturating the soil, means even the macropores which were earlier meant for aeration, which was having the air, they are also saturated with water. So it is a completely saturated form, and it does not contain air. Even the macropores, they are filled with water. Now beyond maximum water holding capacity, the water will not enter the soil. There it was, the water will enter and it will percolate to groundwater. Now here, if you want to pour more water over the surface, it is not going to enter the soil at all. It will be directly removed in the form of runoff. So that is the difference between field capacity and water holding capacity. Then comes the available water. The total water content which is present in the soil, that will be called the hollard. Okay, means all forms that we have studied together, that is called hollard. Now from these forms, the one which is actually absorbed by plants, which is used by plants, that is called the available form of water, cresat. This is also called growth water, and you all know by now that capillary water is the one which is available to plants. So that constitutes cresat, CC. Then the remaining water, other forms of water like the combined water, hygroscopic water, water vapors, right? All those, and the one which is present in very, very fine capillaries, which is not being approachable to plants. The size is 0.2 microns. They are very fine capillaries. They have very high adhesion forces, because of which the water present in such micro pores cannot be taken up by plants. So that's why all these, they become non-usable form for plants and they constitute ECART, that is the unavailable form. So the all forms together, they are called hollard. The one which is available to plants, which is present in the micropores of the size 0.2 to 20 microns, that constitute cresat. And the remaining forms which is not available to plants, which include hygroscopic, combined water, water vapors, the water which is present in the very, very fine capillaries of the size less than 0.2 microns, all these forms which are not available for plants, they constitute ECART. Okay, next term is permanent wilting percentage, which is called PWP or PWC. It's permanent wilting coefficient. C stands for coefficient here. You can use any term. So what does this mean? Its percentage means the percentage of soil water in relation to the dry weight of the soil when the leaves of a plant growing in it show permanent wilting. Means, let's suppose you have a potted plant, okay, and you have not watered this plant for few days. You will say that on first day you observe slight wilting. Okay, when you water it in the evening, it is restored. Then let's suppose for next time for 2 days you are not watering the plants. Again, when you water the plant, it shows again its turgidity is regained. Then for 3 days you are not watering this plant, and again when you add water to this, the plant is still not recovering. Okay, so this will be the stage of permanent wilting. At this time, the amount of water in soil in relation to its dry weight is called permanent wilting percentage. Okay, so the permanent wilting, what is permanent wilting? It is where the loss in turgidity is not regained. I told you, you have not watered plant for 3 days and then you are watering it, still it is not recovering. So when the loss in turgidity is not regained by plants, then we say that plant is in the stage of permanent wilting. So even if you provide water in abundance after that period, means you are creating saturated environment with water, still it is not recovering. So ultimately when plant is not taking up water, it is showing permanent wilting, it is going to die. So the soil, it is not that when the plant is showing permanent wilting, there is no water left in the soil after this stage. Water will be there, it still be some amount, some percent of water will be available in the soil, but that will be unavailable for plants. There will be the other forms which cannot be absorbed by plants. Okay, so that is the concept of permanent wilting percentage. The value, it is from 1 to 15% depending upon the texture of soil, and you can see the calculation on the basis of different coefficient. We studied hygroscopic coefficient, then we divide that with the parameter of 0.68. You can have moisture equivalent divided by 1.84. You can have maximum water holding capacity divided by 2.9. So these are the standard values which have been written in the denominators. So you can use any of these formulas in order to find out permanent wilting percentage. Okay, next definition is field moisture. Field moisture is the percent of water contained in the field sample at any given time. So you visit to a land, you bring soil sample from there and you directly find out percentage of water in that on the basis of dry weight. So it will be called its field moisture. So how to calculate it? You will have the weight of fresh soil, then weight of dry soil divided by dry soil into 100. This we have studied in the form of moisture content in practicals. Okay, another term is soil moisture tension. It is the resistance, tension means resistance. So it is a resistance met by a plant in absorbing water from the soil. You all know, you have studied the physiological phenomena of water absorption by roots. And you know number of resistance they are being offered at the level of soil, at the level of cell wall, cell membranes, protoplasm, right? So there is resistance met by plant in absorbing water from the soil. That resistance is called TSMS. That means total soil moisture stress. This is another term for soil moisture tension. What it is called? Total soil moisture stress. Now it is caused by, why this is caused? Because you know we have imbibitional forces, the forces of adhesion and cohesion working on the surface of colloidal particles of soil. So because of those forces, plant has to absorb water against these forces. So definitely there is a resistance and that is measured in the form of tension. The instrument which is used to measure this is called tensiometer. Okay, next property of soil is pH. pH denotes soil reaction. You all know pH, it is a negative logarithm of the proton ion concentration, means we are going to talk whether the soil medium is basic or acidic. So on that basis the soil reactions will take place. So that's why for pH we use the term soil reaction. Now it has been observed that plants, they thrive best if the soils, they are neutral or slightly acidic up to pH 5. It favors the growth of plants, trees as well. Now soil reaction, that will determine what kind of microorganisms, earthworms, other animals, insects, etc., pathogens, they will grow in that soil. Now it also controls the solubility of minerals, because minerals are very specific. Few are soluble at acidic pH, few in the basic pH. So accordingly the solubility is also decided on the basis of pH. Like if you increase pH of the soil, a simple example is add few granules of urea, immediately the pH will increase by 2, magnitude of 2. So if you increase pH, the availability of zinc, manganese, iron, etc., that will be reduced. They will get precipitated. They will not be present in the soluble form. Whereas the solubility of molybdenum, boron, sulfur, potassium, it will improve. So that is the individual specific behavior of the mineral ions. They will be soluble at low pH or high pH. The last factor is the organic matter. No, we have microorganisms also. This is the second last. The organic matter, you all know, whatever debris is there, litter is there, dead bodies of the organisms, their waste products, whatever is left in the soil, that is converted into the organic matter of the soil. There are minor constituents and major constituents. This is on the basis of their residual time in the soil, means how fast they will decompose. So minor means very fast they are going to decompose, they have less residual time in the soil, and major means which are going to take time for their decomposition. So minor constituents include carbohydrates, proteins, organic acids, lipids, pectins, amino acids, etc., and they decompose very fast. Whereas major constituents include gums, resins, lignins, cellulose, generally materials which are extra secretions or wall materials. So they are going to decompose slowly. Their residual time in the soil is more. So they will show partial decomposition, and it will finally result in the formation of a dark colored amorphous substance called humus. So humus is a product of major constituents. And this process of formation of humus from the fresh organic material, this is called humification. Now we have three types of humus. First is called moor humus. Moor is the one which will develop in a well-drained acidic soils. Here in it, the earthworms are not seen. Earthworms that don't grow in the acidic soils. The color of it will be dark. It will be black or brown colored. Then here the individual components in the humus that you will not be able to identify whatever the components are decomposing. So you will be able to, okay, these are recognizable in moor but not in mole. Then remains, they will be present on the surface. That humus will form a separate layer on the surface that we mentioned as H layer over the topsoil. Okay, so it will appear as a distinct layer. Then you will call it moor humus. Second is mole humus. Mole is the one when pH is above 5. It was acidic. Here it is above 5. So it will you will see earthworms, other detrivores in this type of the humus. Then individual components in this case will not be recognizable, and whenever these mole humus is formed, it will be immediately mixed up with the rest of the soil. Okay, so it will not form a distinct layer on the surface. And in between these we have a category called modder humus. Modder is when the pH range is in between and it is neither true moor nor true mole. It has in between properties, and in this area you observe lot of arthropod droppings, and that's why sometimes you call it insect mole as well. So you have moor. You can see here the pH is acidic. When you move towards modder it's intermediate, and at mole it's more than 5. Then there is present the litter, the carbohydrate and nitrogen ratio. You can see it is more in moor and least in mole. Then the bacterial or fungal microorganisms more in moor, least in mole. Okay, bioturbation, the formation of these different layers, whether they are mixing immediately or certain kind of the movement of the organisms which result in the mixing of the layer. It is least in this case, that's why it is going to exist as a distinct layer. But here when this is formed, immediately get mixed up with the other layers of the soil. So ultimately you don't observe a separate layer. So that was all about humus. The significance we have already discussed, that humus is very important for moisture retaining, for nutrient recycling, for proper growth of the microorganisms, for making the soil properly aerated, for drainage. Okay, all these points we have covered earlier. Now there is a term called peat. What is peat? It has been observed in the forest area especially that there is partially decomposed organic matter on the floor of the forest that is forming a distinct layer. Okay, that layer is called peat, and especially it has been observed in the areas where lot of raisins are released. Like when you study pinus, it has raisin canals. Whenever the needles of the pinus or the twigs are going to fall over the forest surface, then it will decompose partially. It will not be decomposed fully, and then it will result in the formation of a dark colored layer which is called peat. Then next we have soil organisms. The soil organisms, number of organisms like algae, bacteria, actinomycetes, gastropods, etc. they are present in the soil. They constitute soil microorganisms. They are very, very important because they are affecting physical and chemical properties of the soil. They are mainly responsible for nutrient recycling. Now, where they are important, they are in few of these. They are involved in nitrogen fixation. They also help in denitrification and desulfurification. They show allelopathy. Allelopathy means certain chemicals are released by these plants which doesn't allow the growth of other species around in their vicinity. So it's a kind of negative interaction which is also called amensalism when we talk about the animals. But here it is plant based. Then root growth stimulants, they are also released like auxins, IAA, it is produced by the roots. Desiccation, they control desiccation. Then mycorrhiza, where they are associated, fungus is associated with the roots of higher plants. That is also important. It helps the plants as a symbiotic associate, that it gets nourishment, water, food supply from the plant, and in return it is helping in creating more surface area for absorption of minerals and water. Then yes, they may be responsible for diseases also. They may be pathogenic. Then soil formation, like we see the role of earthworms in soil formation mainly. Soil fertility through their excreta, their castings. Then soil carbon-nitrogen ratio. That is also maintained by these microorganisms. So that's all for this topic of properties of soil.